We have a heavy agenda today, so we're going to try to get through it as quickly and as thoroughly as we can. Let me start, as is my custom, with our multimodal roll call. For those of you who are new to the meeting, we start with a show of hands to see what level of commitment and activity there is in the audience to a multimodal system of transportation here in Los Angeles. So, over the past 2 weeks, who has used our expanding and improving rail system here in Los Angeles? Who has used the most heavily used and most popular form of mass transit in Los Angeles, our bus system? Anybody been on a dash bus? You can see who the city employees are. Bicycle. Nice. Anybody commute to work on foot? All right, not bad. Very cool. Okay, so let's hop to item number 1. We'll start with the General Manager.
Item number 1 is the General Manager of Ladot to present a verbal report relative to the Department's ongoing projects and recognition of Ladot's employees for outstanding service.
Okay. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Pleasure to be here. As usual, our once monthly opportunity to recognize the outstanding staff that we have at Ladot. Today, just please stand when I call your name. We're going to recognize Traffic Officer Makisha Shirley. Officer Shirley has been with us since 2011. She has an outstanding work ethic, dedicated, takes pride in providing outstanding customer service, and right now she is assigned to the Venice Beach area, which will be of interest, I'm sure, to the committee chair. Always challenging herself to achieve new goals. In 2014, she trained and qualified to assume the role of acting supervisor to oversee her squad in the absence of her immediate supervisor. In addition to her outstanding work performance, Officer Shirley has received recognition and been commended for her perfect attendance since she became a full-time officer. Every day she strives to provide outstanding service, an excellent representative for the department, and a fine example of the traffic officer program. So thank you so much for your service, Officer Shirley.
Don't go away. Don't go away, Officer Shirley. If you enjoy challenging yourself, you have picked the right area in the city. Are you ready for July 4th weekend? Yes. God bless. Thank you.
Next, we have Tina Baxtrom. Currently finishing up a special assignment in communications, lead media relations officer. She has been excellent to work with, taking on a challenge with professionalism and enthusiasm. You may notice that Ladot is in the news quite often. Her ability to communicate and respond to the media with accurate information, ensuring transparency, is paramount. This fiscal year alone, she timely handled the reporting of over 500 media queries to the mayor's office and vastly improved our communication efforts by revamping our weekly briefs and increasing our distribution. She recently became certified as a licensed traffic engineer and has been promoted to Engineering Associate 3. She will now be working with Ladot's project delivery team in the Metro Project section, where she, without a doubt, will be a great asset. So please join me in congratulating both of them for their outstanding performance.
Congratulations, Tina.
So that's all I have for the report, unless any of you have questions on specific updates you'd like.
Mr. Kretz?
Very good, thank you.
We'll keep it brief today because there's so much else on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. We have one general public comment card. I'm going to take that now. I'm going to close the general public comment after that. So the one public comment card is Sid Marsudian.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Sid Maksudian, and I'm the advocate for the project of the St. Vincent Court, as you all know from the council meetings. As a matter of fact, this morning I was going to make a comment regarding that what I saw where all the council members who took a good homage for Mr. Labonge and an example what kind of a role model he's been to all of the council members one time or another. I just wanted to say in the spirit of that, and especially Mr. Bonin, my project has been stopped at a dead end at the LADOT. And the reasons are beyond my control. Unfortunately, it is political. But if what all my council members, which I believe in them, that they made true remarks as Mr. Labonge being a mentor, that Mr. Labonge always hugged and talked to the constituents, no matter how small or how large. I don't know what else to do as a human being. All of you know that my project is a legitimate project. All of you know that sidewalks are illegally built, wrong built by the street services. Most of you know that LADOT asked me for something impossible to provide, a circular or hammerhead driveway, which I cannot. Yet, LADOT, which I work so closely with them, especially with the enforcement side of it, they have over maybe 20 signs in that alley. No stopping, no parking. It's a chaos. Secondly, as a gentleman, I tried to do the right thing with private money to do the right thing. LADOT stopped me in my tracks. I don't know what their agenda is, but this has to be done right, especially after the Willits case. The city will have to deal with this. And all I ask is the good people of the council put an effort to try to make this happen. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Marsoudian, I made a mistake earlier. In addition to your general public comment card, you had submitted a card for item number 1. So if you'd like, I can give you 2 more minutes.
Item number 1?
Yes.
I thank you. And the reason that I was going to talk about item number 1, just to generalize, is that I hope that the transportation heads will take this as a notice. I'm not here to criticize LADOT or the good people that work for LADOT. But for over a year and a half, as you all know as an advocate, I tried my best to clean that alley to be safe for the restaurant owners, for the building owners, out of my capacity, having several meetings in the alley with the Sergeant Mesa, which everybody's familiar with his name. But the unfortunate thing is that it falls on deaf ears. That particular day, they'll come in and they'll make a couple of tickets and they disappear. But it doesn't take 26 years, which that alley has existed, for them to make a correction of the signs. If it says no stopping and no parking, there shouldn't be no cars in that alley, which it's a safety issue, number 1. Secondly, if the DOT makes the arguments with me on my project where the 18-wheelers, how they're going to get in to accommodate Deli Johnny, well, in the first place, it's an alley. If the proper signs are put in to accommodate all the people who own a share in that particular alley, everybody's intentions will be resolved. And above all, the Angelinos will be having an experience. After all, the mayor wants an experience, sidewalk dining. The council member who is there wants to bring back Broadway. And it's beyond me not to understand. And especially with the Willits case, public right-of-way and handicap issues, why is this city on different levels does not give me the cooperation and the help to see it through for something which will be feasibly profitable and generously to accommodate their needs on everyday lives. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, there's a few items I was going to recommend to move on consent. Items, I was going to recommend 2 through 7, but we have cards on 6 and 7, so 2 through 5. All right, so without objection, items 2 through 5.
Mr. Chair, I think for item number 5, we want to recommend to receive and file in as much as the department has found has worked with the council office and found another solution to that situation.
All right, so without objection, we'll approve items 2 through 4, and item number 5 will be a receive and file. Thank you. All right, we're going to skip ahead on the agenda a bit to accommodate LAPD, which needs to respond to an ongoing public safety emergency elsewhere in the city. So I'm going to skip ahead to item number 10.
Item number 10 is a Bon and Weezer motion instructing LAPD and DOT to report relative to the enforcement of pedestrian violations for individuals entering a crosswalk.
Great. And LADOT, if you come to the table as well. Thank you. So this one was a result of a motion I submitted a short while ago after there had been significant media attention following years of, or a long period of time of grassroots complaints about the way the city of Los Angeles has been using a state law to enforce jaywalking tickets in certain parts of the city. And essentially what the media coverage touched upon is that we have an older state law that was written before the current technology we have with crossing signals, before we had the countdown clock on our meters. And apparently, technically under state law, it is illegal to be crossing when the clock is saying 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Most folks assume that as long as they can reasonably think they can make it across in the 15 or 10 seconds left, that they're safe to be stepping into the crosswalk. LAPD has been enforcing this law in certain places. By some reports, with some focus and some aggressiveness, and that has been upsetting to a lot of folks. Now, we may need to change the state law, obviously, if we want to fix that, but it also raised the question of, is that the wisest and best deployment of LAPD resources in a given area? Are there more effective ways to help implement pedestrian safety, traffic safety, and Vision Zero? So this item's dually referred to this in the Public Safety Committee, but perhaps we could start with LAPD sort of explaining the genesis of the policy and where and how it's being enforced.
Good afternoon. Captain Phil Fontanetta, LAPD, Commanding Officer, Emergency Operations Division. I have the Traffic Coordination Section within my command. We conducted some research based on available data, and we're looking at the Vehicle Code Section 21456B. Once again, that's California Vehicle Code. We can go back to 2014. We have no available information past 2014. So we compared 2013 to 2014. What was interesting, between January to June 2013, there were 3,733 citations written.
How many?
2014.
How many?
3,733 for 2013. For 2014, there was 4,518 for a 21% increase. Looking at 785 citations issued, that was the difference, the spike, if you will. Unfortunately, there was no way to analyze that. There's no system that we can go to and query where was this occurring, what were the circumstances, was it a particular officer? That system just does not exist, which is frustrating when you want to drill down and provide a response. What's interesting, in looking between July to December, so we'll go into the second part of the year, for 2013, the number of citations issued for 2013 was 3,554. For 2014, it was 3,570, which was 16 more tickets. So we flatlined at the end of the year for a 1% increase. Overall, between 2013 and 2014, we had an increase of 11% citations, 781 tickets. Once again, unfortunately, I cannot explain why that bump up. We cannot go into the current system and tell you where we are year to date. It's not available.
Now, the numbers you're talking about, those are numbers for all jaywalking tickets.
That is particular to the code we're talking about, stepping off the curb in the marked crosswalk as the light is flashing.
So we're issuing, in 2014, 4,518 tickets for people who are crossing when the clock is counting down?
Between January to June. for the total of 2014 was 8,068. And that's citywide, 450 square miles of roadway.
How does that compare with the total number of jaywalking tickets overall?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay. There's times all the time when I get constituents who are calling about issues, they're seeking enforcement of some stuff, and I often have to tell them we're understaffed and LAPD can't be everywhere at once, and LAPD deploys based on stats, dots on the map, and so they're often going to be somewhere else other than where you're hoping they'll be at a given moment. So it might take them longer to get there, or they might not be prioritizing the issue that you're calling about. How is it that we've come to a place where this is such a high priority for enforcement?
We don't have that information for this code. We can tell you what we call our top 5 intersections for traffic collisions. We can give that type of an analysis, but for this code, 21456B, there's not a button or anything we can type in a field and get that information. So my best response would be that when a police officer leaves the police station, they are leaving with a mission. Now, whether it's a crime mission or a traffic enforcement mission, it's all compiled together for their duty day, depending on what has occurred on the previous watch, what has occurred historically at a given location. I believe that's the way certain enforcement activities occur. So if we have a historical top 5 intersection where we know 21801A, left turn, is a major cause of traffic collisions, the expectation of the department would be that police officers go to that intersection and enforce 21801A for the left turns. Now, we go into the second part of this, which is the use of the warning. Approximately 6 months ago, our department has given officers the ability not only to enforce the vehicle code with citations, but also with a warning. And so the officers are getting used to that type of discretion where, okay, I'm going to write a citation, this one might get a warning. I cannot give you criteria for that. We cannot write criteria on this is the set of circumstances that would warrant a warning, as opposed to this is a set of circumstances that should receive a citation. That would be a violation of telling officers of what how to do their job. We give them the tools, they have to explore how to use those tools.
Although, I know that, after a CompStat meeting, for instance, an area captain may say to their patrol officers or to the senior lead officer, here's an emerging problem, let's try to put some eyes and some attention on this. The huge numbers of tickets, over 8,000 for this, makes me wonder if there hasn't been some direction from somewhere that this is. I know the department has tried this year to focus more on pedestrian safety, and I'm wondering if this direction has been a direction to help protect pedestrian safety.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, when we had the traffic plan, that was not part of the traffic plan to do that. But yes, you're absolutely right. If the statistical data for a given area shows that there is an uptick or a spike in a particular offense, the expectation is that the officers pay attention to that particular offense in that particular area. If I may, I'd like to share with you that in 2014, we had 35 fatalities inside the crosswalk. And in 2013, we had 34 fatalities within the crosswalk. Going down to 2012, we had 26. 2011, we had 27. And 2010, we had 26. So as you can see, obviously, between 2013 and 2014, we've bumped up to 30, 34, and 35 respectively. So when you look at those fatalities, those are folks that believe they're safe stepping off the curb in those white painted lines. I've never seen those white painted lines stop a car.
Well, yeah.
It's very heartbreaking when you see that.
No, I agree with you completely that the white line doesn't stop a car. I'm just wondering if maybe we're looking at the wrong end of the problem. I mean, if there's the pedestrian-related activities there, to my way of thinking, I'd be looking more at the 2,000-pound piece of machinery that's moving fast towards them, and the driver of that vehicle, and looking to step up enforcement on the vehicular end of it as opposed to the pedestrian end of it. I think the analogy I was making sort of half in jest a little earlier today is that if we had an uptick in robberies at an ATM machine, we wouldn't want to penalize the folks who are using the ATM machine. We'd want to step up the enforcement against the robbers.
And then provide education for the person using that MTM. Yeah, that's a very good point, but the education component definitely comes into play, and you've seen that before.
So is there a point at which in sort of the training or the roll call of the day where there's some instruction giving on what we want to be focusing on or enforcing on in a given week or month or day?
Well, there are missions that are provided. Once again, that's based on statistical analysis through the ComStat process, and are provided to the supervisors as well as the subordinate personnel.
Yeah. I'm genuinely confused about how we just have such high numbers of this particular type of citation, and wonder if there's equivalent data that tells us about how many citations are issued for folks who are driving a vehicle committing violations in the same locations.
That's definitely something we could look at. We'd be more than happy to go back and do that, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the 35 fatalities, or the 34 given the year, do we have any data on who was at fault in those incidents?
Yes. No, we'll get that information. We don't have it on this bullet points.
Okay, because that would be very telling.
Very good. Yeah.
So
we'll give you a breakdown that hopefully will show you enforcement activities citywide. We'll take several vehicle code violations. We'll give you the statistical numbers, and then we'll look at not only pedestrians, and we'll also look at the vehicles, if that's
yes,
what you like. Sound good?
Very much so. Yes.
Very good.
So let me just ask Ms. Reynolds, who's had some experience. I mean, we're trying to move to a Vision Zero philosophy here in Los Angeles, which is very exciting. She's got a lot of experience with Vision Zero in other places, has researched it, has been in other cities. And I want to say I'm very grateful that LAPD has brought its resources to bear, and that LAPD wants to be helpful in implementing Vision Zero. I'm wondering if there's a sense of best practices from other cities about the best ways that law enforcement, particularly traffic officers, can help implement Vision Zero, and what's the best bang for our buck or resource allocation.
Sure. So just a couple of comments on that front. First, there's no question that there is a universal lack of understanding about crosswalk laws generally. I mean, right now we're talking about where you actually have a signal that tells you how much time you have left, let alone where is a legal unmarked crosswalk, a marked crosswalk, who has to yield, who has the right of way. This is a pervasive problem. It's not unique to Los Angeles, and it's one that demands, I think, number one, simplicity and clarification in the laws themselves, and second, as Captain Fontanetta mentioned, more education and more sort of focused effort to help people understand how to share that space safely. Second, when we talk about as you may recall, even up until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, there were no countdown numbers on the crosswalk. You just had the flashing hand. And there were tremendous numbers of people that were what we call stranded in the crosswalk at the close of that clearance interval. The countdown signal itself has diminished that number considerably. And I would say when you look at California cities versus some other cities on the East Coast, which will remain nameless, we have an amazing compliance record. People do generally follow the rules. But then you have those folks who dart out at the last minute when there's only 2 seconds left on the countdown timer. And those are the folks who we're concerned about when they get stranded in the crosswalk. But when we, just sort of to get to your question, LAPD has been an excellent partner to date on Vision Zero. They have co-chaired the sort of steering committee conversations we've had about digging down into the data and coming up with the missions and the real enforcement strategies that get to the real causes of the crashes. And this is a place where LAPD has done an excellent job with CompStat, and we can bring together our own very detailed analysis to figure out what are the top 5 violations that we think are going to drive down crashes, which is what we're both interested in. So I think it's a combination of simplifying the rules, educating folks about the rules, getting down to the real safety issues, and then helping to inform those missions that the officers have. This is a tremendous resource that we have that most other cities don't have in terms of the traffic company presence in Los Angeles. The last thing I'll say about people who do get stranded in the crosswalk is that about half of the people who die while walking every year are over 65. And the time that you are given to get across the street may not be appropriate for somebody who has mobility issues, older adults, moms with strollers, people pushing walkers. These are all things that we as a Department of Transportation need to take under consideration as we time the signals themselves, so that we're giving people a fair shot at protecting them while they're walking across in the crosswalk.
Do we have the leeway to set those ourselves, or is that a state determination?
So there was just recently at the federal level, the walking speed was brought down from 4 feet per second to 3.5 feet per second because they found out that the number they were using was wrong, and we were actually stranding about 50% of the people in the crosswalk. So we've slowed down the walking speed, but we definitely have the latitude to slow that down even further, particularly around places where we have high concentrations of older adults, people with disabilities, children, anybody that needs a little extra time to get across a crosswalk.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian or Mr. Koretz, either of you? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a few things you mentioned. First of all, the timing of crosswalks. We've had some really bad incidents in my district. You're probably aware I had one where with 2 rabbis. The one was the son, and the son wrote to me and said, if you don't slow down this intersection, my father is going to get run over. And we asked for DOT to slow it down, didn't slow it down, and his father was run over and killed. Now, it's not an automatic connection, but it was pretty obvious it wasn't fast enough. I mean, it wasn't slow enough. And a little bit of time afterwards was added, probably still not enough. So I hope the department stays on this very aggressively, because I think that's a big problem with seniors. Higher priority jaywalking, I've noticed just anecdotally in my own driving that a lot more people are crossing on the red in cross traffic. Some more like Boston when I've been there, where if nothing's coming, they cross. And some, to my surprise, even with oncoming traffic, they treat signalized intersections as they would intersections that were just controlled by stop signs. And they see you coming and they will cross right in front of you. I mean, those are the kind of violations that I'd like to see us more aggressively pursue, rather than being in a crosswalk that you can clearly are able to cross the other side. I think within reason, people have to be able to use their own common sense. If you see that you have 15 seconds to cross a crosswalk, I mean a street that you can get across in 10, I don't think you should be getting a ticket for doing that. And sort of a tangential issue, I don't know in general if there's a way to reduce enforcement in low priority situations. I can give you a good example of one where we're probably going to have to ask for a change because we can't get the right level of enforcement. And that is, we have, just for traffic purposes, a no left turn at the intersection of National and Motor. And it is only there purely because there's a cap on the amount of traffic. There's no safety factor at all. And if you make that turn, there's a set of businesses that are inaccessible except by making that turn. And people only do it who are not aware that they've done it before, that it exists. It's their first time. they need to get a computer fixed, they make a left turn, they go about 50 feet, they go into the mall, and they get a ticket. And so these are only people that are getting a ticket for the first time, and they won't make that mistake again because they'll never patronize those businesses again. So the business owners in that area take turns holding up signs saying, don't go to our business, don't make this left turn during 7 to 10 o'clock. The problem is LAPD enforcement, because they're there every single day enforcing something that provides no safety and doesn't really even provide much in the way of change in terms of traffic habits, because it's not the habitual people that are making those turns. They know you can't do it. It's the new customers. So it's the worst possible daily enforcement. It costs us business. It does nothing else. We're probably going to have to remove that sign so that we can stop giving these people these unjustified tickets. If LAPD enforced properly and wrote warnings or patrolled there once every couple weeks, it would be fine. But this kind of enforcement really screws things up. So the question is, why are they there every day on the lowest priority possible enforcement when there are lots of high priority things we can't get to? And how do we change that?
Is that a question of me?
That would be a question, I guess, of both of you.
Well,
I think you work in coordination.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd have to do research to find out why the sign was there. Why was the no left turn sign put there in the first place?
Well, that I can tell you.
Yes.
Traffic is capped on motor. So one of the ways to reduce the amount of traffic and keep it under the cap was no left turn. So all the people that regularly drive around there know that, and they don't do it. So that impacts the cap. What doesn't impact the cap is the occasional people that turn left and access those businesses for the first time. And they get tickets all the time. And that's because they're patrolled daily, and it really doesn't take a volume of drivers off the street going north. It takes the few people that make that turn to get into the business, which doesn't impact the general traffic up motor at all. So it provides us lots of tickets to write, doesn't do anything for the purpose, and we're actually probably going to have to undo it because of the enforcement. And my office has asked, others have asked, business communities asked, please don't constantly enforce this. And it's patrolled like it's the highest priority thing in the city. That's my understanding. And I don't understand it, and I don't know how we can impact things like this, or these other tickets, which I think are somewhat silly to some degree, when there are more critical pedestrian enforcement things that we could do that would have more of a safety impact.
I mean, I think that, right, we don't influence LAPD's enforcement strategy for things like that. The way that we are trying to work together is around the sort of detailed analysis of all crashes for people walking, biking, driving, and you know, we have two different skill sets that are tremendously strong when you combine them, between the engineering solutions that we can bring and the detailed analysis and data that we have, and the enforcement and education solutions that LAPD provides, and the tremendous data analysis that they do. So what I can say is, you know, there's a lot of ad hoc stuff that happens when people work in silos. Vision Zero is an opportunity to bring us together and to focus the enforcement strategy on the places with the highest need, because, you know, I can assure you we share that mission in terms of safety, and also stand to benefit tremendously from working together in a transparent way, where we're sort of saying we think these are the enforcement strategies that we're sort of focused on, and, you know, to help with this kind of ad hoc approach.
So how do we deal with the lowest priority areas getting the highest priority?
Well, you put me on a spot when I'm sitting here, and in my 35...
Well, I'm giving you an example, but it just,
yeah.
You obviously are not familiar with the specific example, but how would something like that happen, and how can we try to track that so we're more focused on our real safety priorities?
Well, I'll tell you, in the example you've given me just now, I'm going to go back and cause an analysis to be done at that location and see how many 21801A caused traffic collisions took place. And we'll go back as far as we can go back. Because we need to look at not only that sign might have been put up because of backing up traffic, but it also could have been put up because that left turn is a primary cause of traffic collisions. And so, we need to look at it twofold, where, we're not seeing traffic collisions, so therefore it's just there for a traffic problem. But let me look at the statistical data. But if I'm at a loss for words, I'm not going to tell you, go ahead and write us correspondence and ask us to remove the sign. I can't remove signs. You're going to remove the sign. But at least afford us the opportunity to do the research, and we can come back with an intelligent response based on that research.
No, that's fair enough. But I'm sure that will be the result, though. I know it wasn't placed there for safety purposes, but someone's planted themselves there and enforces it every single morning. So I just don't know what the explanation is unless we're. And I know we don't have a ticket quota, but other than that, I don't know why someone would have to be there every day despite requests not to be there.
I have no answer. I have to do some research.
Fair enough.
All right, thank you.
But primarily it's an example, though, that I'm trying to get at. It's not the specific, although I'd love some follow-up on the specific. It's how do we get to the point where we're spending a lot of effort enforcing things that we think are pretty low priority and low safety priority, and have people just scratching their heads. I mean, that's how yours came to us. There are enough people out there scratching their heads and writing about it where they're journalists and contacting our offices where they're regular people and saying, why are we focused on this? And I think it's a reasonable question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlike the example that Mr. Kretz just discussed, though, I don't want us to leave this discussion with the sense that 21456B violations are inherently low priority or that these are trivial offenses. I think it's a disservice to LAPD to make that suggestion. In fact, while I'm appreciative of the chair's suggestion that certainly the people in the vehicle should be held accountable for endangering public safety, it is a, excuse me, pun, but it's a two-way street. And most of our traffic laws are designed to protect people from their own lack of good judgment. And this is one of those situations. In downtown Los Angeles, where we have emphasized developing a walkable community, and we've really emphasized enhancing the pedestrian experience, and our development patterns have all been about density and pedestrians and so on, we've had great success in that. And the result of that is that very often on a green light, there is no way that a vehicle can turn right, period. Because there's a steady flow of pedestrians through the crosswalk, which is fine, except they also are not able to turn on the red either, because then there's a steady flow of pedestrians in the other direction. We have to create time separation. The only safe way to make that intersection safe for traffic and for pedestrians is with time separation. And if pedestrians are stepping into the crosswalk on the yellow or at the end of the don't walk time period, they're endangering themselves and they're making it impossible for traffic to progress through the intersection, both of those things. Another example is left turns. People in cars who are making a left turn are looking at oncoming traffic, as they should be, because they don't want to create a head-on collision that will result in a fatality. What they typically don't do is look over their left shoulder to make sure that pedestrians who are crossing late in the light cycle are stepping into the intersection. They should, but most people don't. And so the result is, as those pedestrians are stepping late into the intersection in violation of the law, a driver is beginning to make their left turn, probably trying to get through that intersection before oncoming traffic comes or before the light turns red. And then you've got a conflict situation, which can result in a fatality. So these are not trivial offenses. These are not minor things. Enforcement of the law is important. And I think, Ms. Reynolds, I think some of the suggestions you've made about a broader array of tools that we can bring to reduce these conflicts, really critical, and we shouldn't rely only on law enforcement. But I don't want us to leave this conversation with the assumption that it's somehow a trivial offense and that, you know, this is a low priority and that LAPD is just writing tickets for the heck of it. They're not. They're doing it because they want to make our intersections useful for both pedestrians, bicyclists, and automobile drivers, and we can't do that when people are not following the law of time separation.
We have 3 public comment cards. Robert Pepe, Joe Linton, and Luke Klipp.
Good morning, members of the council. My name is Luke Klipp. I'm here as a citizen, as a resident in Los Feliz, and as a person who works downtown. I actually created an effort called J Dancing LA that happened this last Saturday. When we were out dancing in crosswalks in downtown, a tourist from Portland, 2 blocks away, got a jaywalking ticket. And from the report that I got, they actually said to the LAPD officer who was giving the ticket, I didn't understand that, it was the law, it's not the way it's enforced in Portland. And the officer's instruction was basically, well, that's too bad, that's the way we enforce it here. I can guarantee you that person will not come back to Los Angeles, and if anyone ever asks them, hey, should I go to LA for a visit, they're going to say no. And I understand that we have laws and they need to be enforced. But the reason we did J Dancing and the reason that this is important to me is 8,000 tickets amounts to about a ticket every hour, every day of the entire year. And when you consider we have 64,000 people who walk to work in Los Angeles, that's about 1 ticket for every 8 people who walk to work. Now, I understand that's conflating some statistics and all that, but I'm just trying to give the enormity and the scale of what we're talking about. These are $200 tickets minimum. And when I see the officer at 7th and Figueroa, who's there almost once a week, every week of the entire year, just standing there handing out tickets like it's no business. And these are people who are going to be, some of whom can pay that, some of them are relying on Metro because they can't afford to have a car or whatever the reason may be. They're standing there at a corner. They know there's a lot of foot traffic because there's Metro there, because it's a busy time of the day. To me, this is unfair enforcement. It's targeting people, and it's not about safety. It's about just writing tickets that are convenient to write. If it was really about safety, they'd also be targeting the cars crossing into the crosswalk against the law. They'd be targeting the people who are speeding down the streets, which is creating far more dangerous conditions than a pedestrian who steps into the crosswalk with 15 seconds rather than 20 seconds. That concludes my comment. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Pepe. I'm a resident of Silver Lake and a homeowner there. And I'd just like to say, what do I want to say? Pardon me. I'd like you to ask the LAPD how many citations are given to motorists turning into crosswalks when pedestrians are still in said crosswalks. One other point I'd like to make is I haven't heard of a bicyclist, a skateboarder, or a pedestrian using his body to kill or maim a motorist. And I think this whole conversation of 2 of the council members here is completely out of whack. It just shows the total autocentricity of this council, except for several members, and just a complete non-caring about safety and of pedestrians who are trying to get to the subway, who are using this billion-dollar infrastructure that's been built by this city. It's disgusting what I heard today. Thank you.
After Mr. Linton, Jeff Jacobberger.
Hi, Joe Linton, speaking as myself. I just want to say two points. One is it's not just downtown LA. These ticket stings are happening outside of metro stations in my neighborhood in Koreatown. This is central, dense, transit-rich areas and not just downtown. Second point is, I think that the real solution for this is going to be at the state level, and I think there's a lot of interest in the Bay Area. There's draft language of a law that makes sense for pedestrians to get through safely and to not enter the intersection after that. And I would urge the City Council to include that in your legislative priorities. And also I would encourage Metro board members, Krikorian and Bonin, to make that part of Metro's state legislative agenda, because I think these stings are disproportionately targeting Metro customers. They're happening outside of Metro stations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobberger.
Jeff Jacobberger. I'm the chair of the city's Bicycle Advisory Committee, but speaking on my own behalf today. I came in the middle of the discussion, so I apologize if I'm repeating anything. I've sort of been paying attention to my own behavior, and I've noticed recently that I actually often step off when the light is flashing red. And what happens is, as I'm walking towards the crosswalk, the hand is white, but I have to turn and look at oncoming traffic because I have zero faith that cars are not going to be coming into the crosswalk. And then when I step into the crosswalk and then turn forward again, the light is flashing red. I'm not sure if I would have stopped if, the light had flashed red before I stepped into the crosswalk anyway, but the reality is pedestrians in the city of Los Angeles have zero confidence that cars are going to stop before they encroach into the crosswalk. And I think until we tackle that problem, the fact that we're enforcing anything at all against pedestrians is unfair. One other point, I guess, to think about, when I ride my bike to my boyfriend's house in the Valley, I have to cross the street at the North Hollywood subway station. And there are people waiting and waiting and waiting to cross while there's an orange line bus waiting, and that light takes forever, and there's no cars coming, and there's no cars coming. And we really need, especially around transit stops, to really adjust the signal timing so that it serves the people who are using transit rather than cars, because a lot of the illegal pedestrian behavior is because the lights are timed really improperly for pedestrians.
Thank you. Let me note a few things here. I think it's important to note, despite there being significant disagreement over A, the policy, and B, the enforcement strategy, that I don't think there's any bad guys here. I think LAPD has, to its credit, tried to make pedestrian safety a higher priority. Whether or not we agree with whether or not this is the right strategy, I think that's largely what has been the thinking of LAPD. And I think that and their work with DOT on Vision Zero is something that we should give credit to. I also want to say a word as someone who works regularly with the other members of this committee, particularly on transportation matters, that I don't think either one of my colleagues ever for a second minimizes the importance of pedestrian safety. I'm sitting between two guys who have championed safe routes for schools, who have been advocates for bringing back the crossing guard program and expanding it here in Los Angeles. And whether you agree or disagree with a particular comment or a particular vote, I don't think it's fair to characterize either of my colleagues as not being concerned about pedestrian safety. Having said that, I think I actually agreed with a lot of what Mr. Krikorian said about the importance of correcting people's own misbehavior. I mean, that's the point behind a lot of our traffic laws. I do happen to disagree with the application of this particular policy, particularly with the intensity with which it seems to be applied. Part of this, though, I think comes down to a reasonable confusion about what the flashing light means. Yesterday, I was walking downtown, and I was crossing the street, and I was about to step into it because I saw the countdown clock, and I knew I could make it. And then I was like, damn, I'm going to get a ticket the day before my hearing on this. So I stopped, which was coincidental enough because actually about 50 feet down the street was Chief Beck. So I actually would have been able to learn how much of a priority this was for the department. My mother was visiting me about a month ago, and she saw when I introduced this motion, because she follows me religiously on Facebook, as mothers do, and she fessed up to me that she was a criminal, that when she was visiting Los Angeles, she regularly violated the law without knowing it, because when you see that clock ticking, you naturally think, I have this much time left to cross. So yes, the law may be telling LAPD you're supposed to be focusing on this, but I think it's absolutely nonsensical. When folks see that clock, they're thinking, I have that much time to cross. The solution, the actual long-term solution, might be to change the policy or change the lighting or change the signage in some way so that when you're not supposed to be walking, it's telling you you're not supposed to be walking, as opposed to giving what is literally a mixed signal for a lot of people. What I would recommend is, I think we need a little more information and a little data and a little more work on this, is I'd recommend that LAPD report back to us with the requested data that we've discussed here today, as well as try to dig down and see what data you can get about what was actually written in the motion, about whether there has been specific enforcement in specific neighborhoods, what the cause of vehicular accidents or pedestrian-related accidents have been in those neighborhoods, and whether or not in any area where there's been selective or increased enforcement of jaywalking, whether 21465B or others, there has also been increased enforcement of motor vehicle violations, such as speeding or turning into the crosswalk. I think that's a fair question to ask about how well things are being applied. And to the extent that you can, I think it's important for the public to know whether or not there are certain areas of the city that have been targeted. There's certainly a perception that there's certain areas that are being targeted, and they tend to be near mass transit stops, so that the folks that are getting hit with the tickets tend to be folks who use mass transit, who tend to be disproportionately lower income. And while it's no fault of LAPD, because I think the city ticket is $25, these are steep tickets, because once you're done with the surcharges and the fees that the county and the state attach, it's $200. And that's really, to my mind, a steep fine for someone who is completely unwittingly committing the jaywalking offense. The second thing I'd ask for is that LADOT and LAPD sort of report back collectively on, as a group, on what an enforcement strategy should be to combat or to focus on the top 5 most critical threats to pedestrian safety. Sort of what the best 5 ways are for LAPD to be enforcing, to be helping on that. I totally get that's the goal. Let's make sure we do the right strategy to get there. And if LADOT could also report back on recommendations for either legislative changes, education campaign, or changes in either the timing so that folks have enough time to get through the crosswalk, or the type of signalization that would help us end this confusion. I mean, if the state isn't going to change the law, should we do something different with the countdown clock or something like that? How much time would folks need to do those report backs effectively?
We can have 1 month to gather the data.
Yeah, I mean, I think to do the broader piece about legislative changes and things like that, we'd probably want a little more time than that, maybe 60 days.
Okay, 60 days sounds good.
Yeah.
Colleagues, those recommendations okay with you?
Sounds good.
Okay, so that is the direction of the committee. Thank you both, and thanks everybody here in the audience. Okay, that brings us to item number 5.
No, 5 you received and filed, so it'd be number 6.
Item number
which
6.
is a Wesson Price motion requesting the city attorney to prepare an ordinance to prohibit the parking of vehicles with for sale signs on Washington Boulevard from Harvard Boulevard to Manhattan Place and along Normandy Avenue from 15th Street to Pico Boulevard.
All right, I had just one public comment card on that from Billy Green from CD10.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We just asked that you make one change. There was an accident on the motion. It should say from Kingsley Drive to Manhattan Place.
That's the only change?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay with that? Yep. All right. As amended, that item is approved. Item number 7.
Item number 7 is a Corey and Bonin motion relative to the implementation of a meter post bicycle parking pilot program in Westwood Village and on Great Streets.
And we had one public comment card on this one, Robert Pepe.
Again, Robert Pepe. I think this is a very good idea, and I support it. My only problem with it is that with one hand, the council giveth, and with the other, you take it away. So in the mobility plan in 2010, there was supposed to be a bike lane running down Westwood Boulevard all the way to the new expo station. So that's been done away with by the honorable council member from that district. And I don't see the sense of it. Thank you.
Okay, no further comment on that. We have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Kretz makes the motion. Mr. Krikorian seconds. That item is approved without objection from the committee. Next is item number 8.
Item number 8 is a CAO report relative to establishing new appropriations and or increasing existing appropriations within the Transportation Grant Fund.
All right, if staff could come forward on this one. I believe DOT and CAO are here.
Good afternoon.
Good
afternoon. Ida Rubio with the Office of the City Administrative Office. The report before you is requesting approval to establish new appropriations or increase existing appropriations within the Transportation Grant Fund for transportation projects which have already been approved by Council for a total of $79.3 million. This request is purely administrative in nature and will allow the lead departments to move forward on these projects citywide for design and construction contracting needs over a 3-year period. Just some background on the Transportation Grant Fund annual work program. It's a larger city program that is a collaborative effort between 5 city departments who work together to improve and implement transportation-related grant-funded projects citywide. Services are provided on a cost reimbursement basis, and front funding is provided mainly in Proposition C for direct labor. Department staff is here to answer additional questions if you have anything that you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, a couple questions. I know this is sort of billed as routine administrative changes, but it's literally a big ticket item, so I did want to ask a couple questions because there's a big price tag to it. I just want to get a little bit of clarity on the fund. This is, we take Prop C money and we use it to pay for projects that have been awarded grants that we are certain we will be reimbursed for.
Yes, these grant awards have been awarded to the city, and the general fund or Proposition C will front fund the projects. And when the grants are reimbursed, we deposit that money back into the Transportation Grant Fund, which is used to pay for materials or construction expenses, or it will reimburse Proposition C back or the general fund back for related costs.
And there are times when we apply for grants, which we will be reimbursed for, but we may need to provide a match of some sort in terms of either money or labor or anything else. Is that also paid for out of this fund?
It's my understanding that the match is typically the direct labor that's been programmed in the annual budgeting process.
So that money doesn't get taken out of this fund?
No.
Okay. All right. So there are identified in this action 37 new projects, and those are all fully funded, and this is just reimbursing that.
What we're doing here is we're establishing appropriation accounts so that the departments can move forward with the bid and award process to implement the projects. So they're not necessarily funded in the sense that all of this money is programmed in Proposition C right now. A portion of the salaries are funded in the schedule, but what you're looking at is the total budget of the project. Now that project is going to occur over a few years. It's going to take a while to construct. So what we're doing is we're allocating a dollar amount that's for the entire project, which will be spent over 3 years or longer.
Got it. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5, 6, 7, I guess 8, 7 or 8 projects for which there are increased appropriations.
Yes.
Those increased appropriations are also covered by the grant award as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kress, do you have any questions? No. All right. So without objection, this item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 9.
Item number 9 is an LADOT report relative to submitting applications to the California Department of Transportation for the 2015 Highway Safety Improvement Program Cycle 7 Call for Projects Grant Award.
Good afternoon.
Arsen Mangasarian from LADOT.
Could you repeat that again in front of the microphone?
Sorry. Arsen Mangasarian from LADOT. Item number 9 is a request from LADOT General Manager requesting to submit applications, grant applications to Caltrans to compete for Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, federal funds. Caltrans announced those funds in April. There's $150 million available to the cities and the counties in the state of California. Maximum award to an agency is about $10 million, and the benefit to cost ratio of 5 or greater is desirable. They have recommended that we do not submit any applications if we find out the benefit to cost ratio is less than 5. Department of Transportation sent out a notification to the council offices and the mayor's office, made them aware of this opportunity. There was a committee formed from technical staff from LADOT. We also let Bureau of Engineering and Bureau of Services know about this opportunity. The committee evaluated about 100 different locations. The way we developed these projects, we worked with the district engineers, the ones that are directly in contact with the council offices, and we asked them to submit projects that have a good chance of getting funded for these grants. We looked at over, as I said, 100 different locations. The way committee recommended this to be done is on 5 different packages. I think those packages are on the attachment A of your document. The package 1 is all the RRFBs, which is rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those have been proven to be very effective in solving pedestrian accidents. So package 1 includes about 34 locations. By the way, I asked the city clerk to pass out the additional information so you can see all those locations. Package number 2 is signal modification package. This includes all the locations that you were talking about not too long ago about solving the issue of the accident and left turn issues that Mr. Krikorian brought up. These are addition of left and right turn to the existing operation of the traffic signal. Package number 3 is brand new signals. We're proposing to install brand new signals, about 11 locations. Package number 4 is a standalone project. It's a Crenshaw Boulevard traffic street improvements from Florence to 79th Street. This street has tremendous crash data associated with it, so we felt this project can be a standalone project. It also includes other civil improvements that will require either Bureau of Street Services or Bureau of Engineering to be involved with the process of developing these projects. Bureau of Engineering has indicated to us about 2 hours ago that they would be leading this project. We will be preparing the application with their help.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The Bureau of Engineering will be leading this project.
Which one was that?
The package number 4, the reference number 4. Crenshaw, yes. Crenshaw Boulevard traffic and street improvements, Florence Avenue to 79.
Okay.
Package number 5 is again standalone project. This is also a high crash area, Latuna Canyon, and we felt that this project has to be a standalone project because the range of the cost from this project, we put down $270,000, or $300,000, but it can go up to $1 million depending on what we find out throughout the project preparation. So we're hoping to submit about $12.3 million to Caltrans to be able to capture about $10 million worth of grants. That is our recommendation. That is the recommendation of the technical committee. I also like to mention 2 other items related to this report. One item is that we are supporting a project with City of Carson. We're helping them to prepare the application for a project that is shared by City of LA. We share about 25% of that location. They will submit the application, but they've asked us to help them with the match. You know, there's a 10% match required on this grant. So we asked that you approve about $25,000. We kind of took the high end. You know, that's about $1 million project. We don't think that's going to be $1 million project. We think it's about $400,000 to $500,000, but we put down that we want to share 25% of their match with them. We estimate that should be about $10,000 to $12,000. Another item that I have, my general manager here sitting next to me, I'm sure she will be talking to you about that, is the obligation of some of the projects that were funded under the Cycle 5. Those are the attachment 5 in your document, and there are 3 projects that involves road diets and bicycle. So if you have any questions, please.
Thank you very much. Before a couple of questions, there's 2 public comment cards. Jeff Jacoberger and Kevin Osabillo from CD14.
Jeff Jacoberger, Chair of the City's Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'd just like to speak as to the last item, which is the deobligation of the funds for bike lane projects. Under the 2010 bike plan, the city set a very ambitious goal of 50 miles of bike lanes a year on sort of the difficult and challenging streets. The projects that are being deobligated are the year 2 projects. We're now 4 years into the bike plan. We should be on year 4 projects. Of the 50 miles on the year 1 projects, I think only about 10 miles have been implemented. We're turning back all of year 2, which means it's 0. We haven't started year 3 or year 4. So under a plan in which we're supposed to have 200 miles of bike lanes, we have about 10. And I think if we're going to have a system where bike projects are forced to rely on grant funding, I mean, it's not really fair to the bicycling community, with all due respect, to have a city council unanimously request applications for funding for specific projects and then not allow those projects to go forward. A lot of us spend a lot of time, our volunteer time, trying to do outreach on some of those projects, and they're sort of just killed without discussion. And with all due respect, I mean, I understand why the money's being turned back, but you know, the process is broken and not fair to the bicycle advocate community. Thank you.
Thank you. CD14 here? There we go.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon, council members. Kevin Ockby on behalf of CD14. Our office has been working with the Bureau of Engineering to implement a number of improvements related to the 6th Street Viaduct project. This includes several projects that would qualify under HSIP, including roundabouts, some signals, and other related items. After discussing with DOT and BOE, we found out that only transportation agencies can apply for HSIP funds. So we're hoping that the committee will authorize LADOT to submit the BOE project under this round of applications. We made it clear to BOE that they must do all the work and this shouldn't take away from any of the DOT resources, and that they're just applying on behalf of engineering in order to make that happen. We understand that the project may not get funded or might not be, but we're confident in its competitiveness, and we're just asking that we are able to put our hat in the ring. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask a couple questions. I'll get to the CD14 item in just a bit. But I wanted to talk about the projects that we're seeking to take off the list, that are being deobligated. And I'm reading from the report from the general manager. It says, DOT was unable to conduct the extensive outreach needed for each of the planned funded corridors due to the loss of 4 staff members in the bicycling program during 2014 as a result of resignation, retirement, or reassignment. This sounds like we took a pretty big hit, and it's been pretty debilitating, and that we're losing some projects that we'd hoped to get done because of that. Where are we in filling those slots?
So that was a big hit, and we are in the process of filling those spots. I believe we've filled one of them. One out of the 4 so far, and then we're in the process of filling the other 3. So personnel is making the list for the other 3. So we've been able to get 1 back. We have 3 more to go, and then in the coming year's budget, we have additional positions for both Great Streets and Vision Zero, which will be critical to continuing to build the foundation of folks that can work on projects like this. I will say about the projects that are going back, I did everything in my power to try and keep that money in Los Angeles. We were not able to use it for different projects on different streets or different projects on these streets, and it is more desirable to relinquish the money than to not meet milestones with Caltrans and put ourselves in jeopardy for all of the money that they disperse. These are good projects, they're important projects, and we're not giving up on them. And we will be coming back and building them. Although I will say that I hope that they look a little bit different when they come back. That first and foremost, they are truly complete streets proposals, that they include improvements for all modes of transportation. Second, that they reflect the state of the practice of bike design, so that we're not settling for just a regular bike lane when we could have true protected infrastructure. And the last thing I'll say is that in the department, even though we took a tremendous loss in the bike group, we've also been taking time to reflect on how we conduct outreach and how we begin community conversations. So we've brought intensive public outreach training to the department, and we have, in light of the coming mobility plan, which will change both the priority projects and implementation marching orders, we're going to have a different way of doing business so that we don't end up in the same seat again.
I'm glad to hear all that. I'm still freaked out about the vacancies and about how long it's taken to fill them. And I'm particularly encouraged that I know that we have even more slots that can be filled with bodies in the fiscal year beginning July 1. But it's going to take us a while to fill those as well.
Correct.
The holdup is all at the personnel end?
We have to wait for them to come up with a list in order to fill those positions.
And if I go back to personnel, is personnel going to say we would, but there's A and B and C we're waiting for from DOT?
We've been working very closely with personnel to prioritize our positions, and my understanding is that they are prioritizing our positions, not just in this group. This is department-wide that this issue exists. So I feel confident that we are in a place where those things are moving forward with all due speed. And sometimes this is a frustrating reality of being in a large bureaucracy.
And has personnel given you any indication on when you might get the list?
Opens at the end of July.
And will that be for the positions in the new fiscal year as well as these 3 vacant positions?
It will be for classifications. So we will, correct? We'll be able to fill lots of positions from that list. Yes. So it doesn't fill for, it's not a list for particular positions, it's a list for classifications. So we have several transportation engineering associate 2s this year and next year. Once the transportation engineering list is done, we'll be able to fill all of those from that list.
I'm sure that the chair of personnel and the chair of budget and finance understand this better than I do, but once you get the list, what are the other, what
then it's
steps?
on us. Then it's on us. Setting up the interview process, bringing in candidates and selecting them and making the offer and then bringing them on board.
So I bother personnel now, I bother you later.
That's right.
Okay.
You can keep bothering us. We're happy to work with you.
I think history demonstrates that I might. Okay. Let me ask about the request we just heard from CD 14. My understanding is there was a detailed process that led to these recommendations. There was a sort of a technical advisory committee, BOE weighed in, DOT weighed in. What's the thinking on a request coming in now? My understanding is DOT and BOE both support the request, but isn't it likely that I have other colleagues who, if they knew this was an opportunity, they'd want to toss stuff in right now?
When the notification went out to the council offices, CD14 contacted us. So did all of your council. They contacted us about this, and I gave them the information. They told us about the 6th Street Bridge project, and we requested that they come forward with the data and with identifying who would be carrying out the application preparation. And we waited till this morning after we decided on the list to be notified that they will be coming to this meeting to plead their case. So it's just they missed the boat. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
I'm totally unclear. So all of our offices were notified, and
Yes.
then certain offices indicated this is a project we'd like considered. They all went through the process.
They told us this is a project, this 6th Street project. They would like to submit it to our committee to be reviewed, but they didn't make the committee's meetings. They were late to submit their project. So the only remedy that I could suggest to come to this forum and try to get your approval to add it to the list of the projects.
Which I'm totally open to. I'm just wondering what the department's response is going to be if, when this comes to council and other colleagues see that we've just added another project outside of the committee process, if 3 other council districts have projects they want to add. Is that something you'll be supportive of?
We have to know about the projects, council member Pryor. I mean, we know about this project, and we support that project for them to come forward to this committee. But if there's a project out there that we're not aware of anything, that we need between now and council, which is on Friday, to be aware of that fact.
Dan, did you want to add?
Yes, Dan Mitchell, Department of Transportation. So the issue here was one of timing from the time the notification of these funds were available. This was a particular late developing project, and one that involves data collection that's more extensive. So they weren't able to get it in time for our committee because of the upcoming council recess and the deadline for these applications. It required that we put this report and get your approval rather quickly, and they weren't able to meet that timeline.
Are there, I'm not trying to be opposed to the request from CD14. I'm trying to look out for the other 11 council offices that aren't represented in the room today. And is there any other council office that might be in a similar situation? Because I want to make sure they also get a fair crack at it.
No, Council. Not that we're aware of.
And who was on the technical advisory committee? Which offices were represented?
There were the three district engineers in charge of Southern, Central, and Western District. The engineer in charge of the APD program, Active Transportation Program. Myself with the senior in charge of the project delivery, and few staff members, other staff members. This was a technical committee, very technical committee. We went through analyzing every single project to come up with a BOC or benefit to cost ratio.
Right, and I know data was very important to your consideration. So the reason I was asking who was on it was to then ask the follow-up question.
It was the DOT staff.
Yes. So, but the reason I was asking who was on it was to ask the follow-up question of which of those members have now had their eyes on this, so that we know that a consensus or a significant composition of the technical advisory committee says, yeah, this is a good one.
I don't think any of those members had that knowledge of this. It didn't go through the district engineers process.
I think the unique thing about this particular project is it's being proposed by the Bureau of Engineering, and typically the Department of Transportation has a process that develops these projects. So with your concurrence, we agree that we will facilitate them submitting this application.
I think we also want to make sure that we reassure you that the technical committee agrees that the project meets the bar for this particular grant source, that it will score well, et cetera. There's a $10 million cap here. We're not going to get more than $10 million. We're already submitting 12, so we're already over the cap. When you add this project on top of that, we'll be further over that cap. And so we want to make sure that all the projects we're putting forward are high-quality projects that we think are going to be very competitive.
And you're saying that this does meet the standards of the technical advisory committee?
I'm saying it sounds like the department has not made that evaluation, and that we need to do that, is what I'm hearing.
Is that something you can do before Friday?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That works. Mr. Kretz? Mr. Krikorian?
Councilmember, if I may ask a question.
Yeah.
If that project is benefit to cost ratio of less than 5, you still want us to come and report that to you, or automatically that would be, or if it's over 5, then automatically will be added to the...
What do you mean by over 5?
The requirement for these projects to be competitive, they have to have a benefit to cost ratio of over 5. Meaning that if you're spending $1 million, you have to get the benefit of $5 million.
Yeah, my recommendation would be if you guys can take a look at this between now and the time it comes to council, and it meets the standards, then it be included in the package. Okay.
That's consistent with what we did with the call. So if it meets the criteria and it exceeds that, then they included it. If it does not, it will not be part of the final recommendation.
Glad to know I can be consistent when I'm doing something on the fly.
That's why I made a note.
That's great. Thanks for the affirmation. All right, so with that objection, then that'll be the recommendation of the committee with that specific direction.
Thank you.
Brings us now to item number 11. Am I correct?
Okay, item number 11 is a Weezar Buscaino motion instructing DOT to report relative to re-evaluating the configuration of streets in downtown LA, analyzing pedestrian multimodal transportation options, making downtown a more walkable and safe environment.
All right, we have 2 public comment cards to start with, Juliet Arroyo and Batman or Catman, I can't tell. Juliet, come on up.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name's Juliet Arroyo, and I'm a resident of downtown LA. I'm also a transportation planner, and I'm multimodally dependent. So I would just ask that the City of Los Angeles look at the reconfiguration of circulation in downtown LA in a very innovative way. There's new tools, new methods, new ways of reevaluating, reconfiguring the streets, reconfiguring public spaces. As you probably know, California just passed a law creating Class 4 protected bikeways. That's something that could be considered for downtown LA. So I'm just supporting this motion and that the City of LA be more innovative in circulation for all modes in downtown LA.
Thank you.
Yes. Item 11, we want to make the streets more friendly. Well, translation, busting the homeless, jailing people for being on the street longer than 24 hours at one time, gentrification. Well, that's what it is. I mean, see, the problem with you is that you like to hide behind false words. When in reality, I'm telling you what you're really doing, but you like to use falsities.
You're off topic, Mr. Spindler. Please speak to the item at hand.
Anyway, if you're hearing but you're not listening, the walkable and safe environment for pedestrians is only going to exist if you gentrify and get rid of the minorities and the homeless. And that's what Hitler did to Germany. And that's what you're doing to downtown. You're taking downtown and you're cleansing it ethnically and economically so that you can put your white middle-class whoop-de-doos down there and increase rents. But the homeless are going to go elsewhere. So today they'll be in CD 14, then they'll move to CD 1 or CD 9, or God forbid in CD 5 they may wind up. And if they wind up in CD 5, Paul Koretz will take care of that problem, won't he? If not, I will. But in any event, this is just another nice little motion, but in reality, it doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes the problem further east, further north, further south, and you're doing it to gentrify things because you still hope that you're going to get a football team. They're never going to come here because the NFL knows that you're too corrupt.
Kevin, did you want to come up and sort of frame this one for us?
Sure. Thank you. So there's just a couple of amendments that we were hoping to make to the motion that we could do fairly quickly. In discussing with staff, the mobility element or mobility plan is approaching final adoption, and we understand that there is room in the future to work with planning staff and DOT to effectuate some of the changes that this motion calls for. Moreover, we found that parts of the plan already satisfies the needs of the motion, and so we thought it best to move forward in that direction and more speak about how the strategies addressed are consistent with the policies and approaches in the mobility plan rather than asking or instructing DOT to necessarily integrate them into the plan. Lastly, we were hoping to amend the boundary slightly to include Chavez instead of First Street, as it's more of a natural starting point in boundary in downtown LA. And I have a copy of some of the amending language here if you guys would like to see it.
Okay, if you could submit that to the clerk. This item is seeking DOT and DOT to report to Plum and to this committee with thoughts on the proposed reconfiguration as outlined by CD 14 and as amended. So without objection, that's the direction of the committee. Thank you. No, sir, you don't. Item number 12.
Item number 12 is a Weezer bond in motion instructing DOT to report relative to implementing leading pedestrian interval signal timing at intersections in downtown LA, integrating this programming into the mobility plan for the city and other actions.
Okay, we have two public comment cards here, Catman, and I believe the other one is, it's a scribble, but I assume it's Mr. Herman.
Yes, here we go. CD 14, gentrification, economic and social cleansing of the poor and the blacks and the Latinos who do not have jobs and houses. Same thing, but you want to couch it in lovely words because the biggest racists are in this room right now. And yet they cry foul. Even when somebody brings a Turkish flag in, they cry foul. But here we are.
Mr. Spindler, the item here is changing signal timing software. Please stick to the item.
Okay, so we're gonna complain. Okay.
So we're going to have to talk a little bit more quieter. Yes, we got the 3 babies up there. Okay. So we're gonna do a bunch of things to make signals faster. So people that are slow, that walk very slow, they have to get across the street without getting run over by a taxi, like on item number 14, when they turn too fast right on those one-way streets in the dangerous jewelry district and the fashion district. They're so fast, those cars, but you have to make the lights and the yellow signals faster so the police can write all of those tickets and the ticket traps to raise money for your white racist gentrification programs. And that's what item 12 is really about. It's not about mobility. It's about stupidity, because we all know that the streets are too congested and the signals are too slow, and it's very hard for people to walk fast before they get hit by the cars. Like I noticed how fast Paul Krikorian walks.
All right, the next card is from the scribble.
Well, the scribble is my name. It's addressed as Mr. Herman, sir. And regarding your motion here on item 12, pedestrian experience, public space, improved down-street access, well, I find that irrelevant to the subject of the matter. You heard the first speaker talk about gentrification. That's where it goes down to. It boils down to gentrification, taking a group of individual, poor, helpless people out of the pedestrian walkways so that you can have total access like Nazis and run the city of Los Angeles based on an experience. So, taking it right out of your motion here, it says here for the Los Angeles foot and bicycle or bicycles, types and trips. When I was on 5th and Main with Mr. Weezer, I asked him, why are you putting a pedestrian bike rack in the street? Why don't you improve the conditions of putting parking for the disabled so they don't have to walk 200 effing feet from one hotel to the bike rack or from the bike rack to the 50-foot bar? Why can't the people just allow people who are drunk like Mr. Weezer just to roll out to the car and get in a DUI? The subject of priorities, both long and short-term process for incoming public infrastructure is a big, hilarious joke. Go to 311 Broadway and see for yourselves at the optometry. You put an illegal ramp at the curb so that I or any person who's disabled can trip, fall, and slip because you created an illegal infrastructure called a ramp at the curbside. Do you get it yet, Mr. Krikorian? An illegal curb cut.
Thank you. Could CD14 and staff come forward? Is there someone from DOT on this one?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you again, council members, for addressing this important motion today. Just another quick amendment to this motion. We'd like to specify and direct DOT to create specific policy guidance, building from what's already in the Mobility Plan's Complete Street Handbook, specifically in coming up with recommendations and a policy or overall guidelines on where to put new leading pedestrian interval timing based on demonstrated need and benefit would be better than what's currently there. So that amendment is also passed around for consideration.
Okay, I'm a little unclear on the amendment, Kevin. There's two moving clauses in the motion.
Sure.
The first one is asking DOT to take some immediate steps to implement the leading pedestrian interval signal timing and to report back. The other one is asking for some report backs to the various committees. Are you still at this point asking for them to take immediate steps, or are you asking for them to report back before taking immediate steps?
We'd like them to create specific policy guidance based on demonstrated need and benefit on places where to place on specific locations, so that report back could come back first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, since we're just asking for report backs, then I guess I don't have a ton of questions for staff. We can do that when you come back, unless. Okay. So without objection, that item is approved. We'll look forward to the report backs. Is there a period of time in which we can expect them?
Sure. So that's actually part of our strategic plan benchmark, and our first benchmark is October of this year. So I'm hoping to get it done before then, particularly due to the fact that there's interest in moving forward a program. So I think that end of August we could have something for the committee to consider.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Item number 14.
13?
Or 13, thank you.
Item number 13 is a Weezer bond in motion instructing BOE, DOT, and the Department of City Planning to designate Harlem Alley as a pilot project for a vacated pedestrian alley and identifying other appropriate space and opportunities for pedestrian alley and green alleys in downtown Los Angeles.
Okay, we have 3 cards on that. Sid Mansudian, Mr. Spindler, and Mr. Herman.
Good afternoon again, council members. When I read the motion, it is a motion regarding Harlem Alley. I don't know where Harlem Alley is, but it would be proper to include, especially if this is going to be a pilot program, the St. Vincent Court. Because there is not a better example of St. Vincent Court, which is a 400-foot alley, has been proven over 26 years as being one of the first historic outdoor dining alley. Also, back in 2003, the city has spent about $460,000, a grant that was brought in by Jan Perry, which was incidentally wasn't done correctly by street services. If the District 14, and this is not to knock District 14 any shape or form to criticize them, but it would be proper in the eyes of the council and also District 14 to do it right for once, to include St. Vincent Alley with Harlem Alley, to make an example to show how could alleys be transformed, especially where this alley already has been transformed more or less than other alleys in LA. I haven't seen any alley just like St. Vincent Alley yet. I've been into a lot of alleys in LA. So I hope Mr. Bonin, Mr. Krikorian, Mr. Koretz find a solution where we can put St. Vincent in a proper context. If this motion is to do right, please include St. Vincent so the DOT, Bureau of Engineering, also the building owners, also the council, and collectively, in the spirit of Mr. Labonge when he says, let's get things done, there is no better time to include St. Vincent in this motion, if it's possible. And I thank you.
The prior speaker, as usual on sidewalk issues, he speaks very well because he has a lot of ideas and experience with development, repair of sidewalks, and ADA compliance. And one of the things you need to do at these alleys is to have proper wheelchair access. because a lot of these alleys were used for cars and also drug dealing and prostitution, which is a good use of an alley. If you're not working for City Hall, then you should be selling drugs or pimping out, because that's another good way to make good money. But I digress. So the San Vincent should be added, and the late Tom Labonge, before he passed away, talked about getting things done forward. So in honor of his memory, I think this should be called the Tom Labonge Harlem Alley Pilot Project. What a fitting way to describe an alley that was once driven over by cars polluting and selling of drugs and infrequent urination after drinking, turning it into a sidewalk, a pedestrian alley, and a green space. And maybe also in these alleys we can tear up the concrete and we can put in artificial turf. And then the people can go and play croquet or horseshoes. People like to play horseshoes. Well, white people like to play horseshoes. And so all these areas are going to be reconstructed for white people, so consider lawn bowling as well in the alleys, because that's a good thing to do. Thank you so much.
I got a new word for you. Is it imperative that you comply to the Charretti? CHARRETTE. Figure it out. Figure it out. That because alleys are and or streets, therefore they're a part of transportation, a network of public right-of-ways. And I can't believe you consider Mr. Sid Manansewins as nothing. How many years have I heard him protest diligently to Weezer, even this morning in Public Works and in general public comment for one fucking minute? He was denied to talk about the access issues on sidewalks where he and the Giunali family participated to take active part and pay a part of fixing the problem out of their own money. So don't say you're doing transportation any good. It's the largest account you can have. But without a soul or a conscience, Mr. Krikorian, you lead the man on to believe that his sidewalks are safe. You improve pedestrian safety. But rather you created the havoc at San Vicente. Is this proper justification for the conditions of the sidewalk? You can smirk all you want, but you're still going to comply to the transportation network of public right-of-ways and use, Mr. Krikorian, because the Department of Justice and Will McClure from Sacramento are coming in to investigate the ongoing disruption of use for sidewalks, streets, and alleys. Gotcha! Gotcha! Because I've become the new advocate for ADA compliance.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to come up?
Thank you, council members. Again, further discussion with staff at BOE Planning and DOT, we thought to further amend this motion to just craft it a little bit better in order to achieve greater alleys in downtown LA. BOE is the lead agency on alleys, and so in discussing with staff, we felt it would be more appropriate if BOE take the lead on any alley-related efforts with support from DOT and city planning. Additionally, we'd like to explore how to approach this concept of shared open spaces outside of the vacation process. Our public spaces, we feel, should remain public, and at the same time, we should innovate to find better ways to enrich and enliven and maintain these spaces. So there's another amendment that's been circulating around there for your consideration. Thank you.
All right. And again, that's just asking those departments to report back with some further recommendations. So without objection, as amended, that will be the direction of the committee. Now, the final item.
Item number 14 is a Bond and Krikorian motion requesting the city attorney to prepare 2-year franchise extensions with the current 9 taxicab companies effective January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2017, and instructing DOT to report relative to a preliminary scope of work for a study of the city's existing taxicab regulatory framework and functions.
So let's start with a brief overview by staff, and then I will do public comment, and then we'll do some questions.
Good afternoon. Tom Drischler, Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Last week, the Board of Taxicab Commissioners exercised their option to extend the existing franchises for 2 additional years. So that has already been done. The question now is it really is in the council's ball court now as to whether you want to extend beyond those 2 years, in which case we would call, you can do, I believe, an additional 3 years beyond 2017. And that would be done by council ordinance, and that would be called a renewal. And the existing terms of the franchises would be continued if you want to do that way. But that's council's option at this point in time. But as things stand now, the existing franchises are extended through the end of 2017.
And explain how that is the case. A few years ago, the council decided to sort of bifurcate or duplicate responsibility for extending the franchises.
Well, in 2010, the franchises were extended for 5 years by council ordinance, but they included the option for the board to extend them up to 2 one-year extensions through 2017.
So either the council or the board could have extended?
Yes.
So it's just a question of which of us did it first?
In this case, I guess so. Yes, sir.
That's a weird way of doing things.
Well, it was a built-in option, and the board reviews the staff's recommendations, based on the performance of the companies through, a great many kind of indicators that we use to determine that their level of service meets the standards that were set by the council. And the commission decided that they had done that and therefore granted the 2 years.
So our options today are we can sort of affirm it, we can supplement it, but if we wanted to disagree with it and tell them they couldn't, then that would require a 245 action on the council's part.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we have, stay put, we have a handful of public comment cards. Mr. Spindler, Mr. Herman, Michael Geiler, Aideen Kavak, Jono Bogdanian, and Bill Rouse. Mr. Spindler.
Yes, shout out to Uber and Lyft, because taxi cabs, they're in the past. They're as old as the movie Taxi Cab or the series Taxi. Today, if you had a series, it would be called Uber or Lyft. And these poor taxi companies, you economically lynched these people. Going back to 2010 regarding those fuel-efficient vehicles, I was here. I watched when you mandated these stupid things. And all of this over-regulation, they had to raise prices. Now, competition came in. And when you're an Uber or Lyft driver, you use your own car. The only thing you need is liability insurance. You don't need to have fuel-efficient vehicles or a percentage set aside for alternate fuel vehicles. And you don't have to pay for a taxi franchise. It's great. Let the taxi cab companies operate without having to pay a franchise fee to this corrupt city. Because these taxi cab companies are going to have to reinvent to be able to compete and accurately be able to get fares in this new environment. It's too unfair for these taxi cab companies not to have flexibility to do the innovations, to compete with the Ubers and the Lyfts. I love Uber and Lyft, but I also love our taxi cab companies, and they should be able to innovate. But you're restricting them in this 18th century model, which is corrupt. And that's why these new companies formed. So give them the money back so that they can use that money and invest in technology and innovation. That's what these people need. They're good people.
Comparative to what? A city that violates the city charter by its restrictions, its mandate, by a framework of regulatory taxi cab functions? Is that appropriate? Or am I speaking inadequately about how you bully people to follow your ideas of what you call economic fairness? I call it economic disaster. A framework created by Krikorian, the budget man, who's trying to tax upon tax upon tax all the taxi drivers and anyone who wants to be creative. Instead, the public pays the price, not just only in the back end, like our mayor, Eric Garcetti, who has not created transportation ideas outside the box. Because if there was any fairness outside the box, already with taxi drivers here, Uber wouldn't be a success today, nor would public transportation known as MTA. Off topic, correct me, Mr. Clerk. But the existence of taxi cabs have always been a positive. And now with your conditions as the Gestapo, the Nazi regime, to decide what you will mandate for the functions of this city, stick to the city charter. Allow competitiveness. Stop making up stupid rules from your preliminary scope outside of your stupid idea. Keep it one
side. Next speaker is Aidan Kavak, followed by Jano Begdanian.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. My name is Aidan Kavak, and I drive a yellow cab, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my fellow drivers. We ask you that you support the 2-year taxi cab franchise extension with hopefully a 2-year optional renewal while the taxi cab study is being done. The last few years have been really challenging for us because our business has gone down by about 30%. We continue paying our fees and conducting our business according to the rules that have been set up by the city and the DOT. We also continue making all kinds of improvements to our businesses in this down market. Please grant us this extension so we can afford to continue doing business. And also I want to say this, thinking about franchise extension and renewals is the last thing that I want to think about while I'm trying to go through these really tough times, being able to support my own family and trying, as a taxi business, staying afloat. I thank you.
Thank you. Jano Begdanian, followed by Bill Rouse, followed by, I think it's Andre Minasayan.
Mr. Chairman, members of the T Committee, Jano Begdanian, LA City General Manager. I'm here on behalf of the 9 franchise taxi cab companies. I'm respectfully requesting that the T Committee consider the approval of an additional 2-year renewal of the current taxi cab franchise beyond the December 31st, 2017 extension date that has been approved by the Taxi Cab Commission to a new date of December 31st, 2019. The 9 taxi cab companies have provided quality cab service over the past 20 years to the City of Los Angeles residents and the businesses. The taxi cab industry is in a state of change and needs time to implement changes that will best meet the transportation needs of the city, from innovation in technology, continuing with the clean fuel vehicle purchases and implementation, and overall structure of delivery of service. The taxi industry is willing to change and needs the continued support of the city in terms of streamlined regulation to level the playing field to compete with new forms of transportation. The additional time will give our drivers that have invested in this industry the level of comfort to operate their cabs in the city and deliver quality service, and allow the taxi companies to further invest in technology and innovations and green vehicles. The approval of the 2-year renewal in addition to the current 2-year extension is respectfully requested. In the interest of time to having everyone testify, I'd like to have all the managers and the taxi cab operators that are in the audience to stand up in support of our request. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Bill Rouse.
Good afternoon, council members. William Rouse, Yellow Cab and United Checker Cab. I want to speak to the second half of the motion concerning the study. As the council, the entire council is aware, the taxi cab industry is composed of thousands of working families, all of whom are following the city's rules and paying the city's fees. Our industry is suffering because of the unlevel playing field that's been created by the California PUC's assertion of jurisdiction over what we have found always believed to be bandit taxi cabs. How cities respond to that needs to be done in a thoughtful, deliberative process, but we don't have much time before our industry is irreparably damaged. And so what we're asking is for the study to bring in a nationally recognized expert, for the study to be fully funded, and for the study to be implemented as soon as possible. And so with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Final speaker is, I believe it's Andre Minassian.
Hi, council members. I represent Independent Taxi, and I'm here to ask you for a 4-year extension for taxi companies, because I believe all of our companies has done well and been performed satisfactory to the city requirements, and all of us performed better than was minimum required by the city. And I think we deserve to go for 4 years extension, such for the sake of retaining stability, and it will help us to retain some of our professional drivers. And also, it's important for our members to invest into vehicles that, in some cases cost $15,000, $20,000, renewing our fleet. And I'll appreciate extended time for working together with the city so we can equalize the playing field and we can better compete with current TNCs that are working in the city. And in addition, I also would like to remind you that we also pay our share to the city, and which is a big share, close to $4 million a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick question for Tom. When the Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners, or the commission extended the franchise by 2 years, did they also extend the provisions that had been in place about fuel-efficient vehicles and stuff like that?
Yes. All that went forward with the extension. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thanks. So for point of clarification, there were 2 points to the motion. One was to ask City Attorney to prepare and present the 2-year franchise extension. under those terms and conditions. I think we want to change that to affirm the decision of the commission since it's already been done. The second element of it was to ask for the report that Mr. Rouse referred to back in 90 days with the preliminary scope of work for the study. Whether the franchise renewal is for 6 months or 10 years, I think we need to have a sense of urgency about doing this study and getting this report done. So I also understand that one of my colleagues has an additional amendment to the motion. Mr. Kretz?
Well, I have a written amendment. I don't know if it's necessary to provide it or just to give you direction to add an extra couple of years in I guess 1 year increments to get us to 2019. But I think it's clearly a necessity at this point. Obviously, we had more frequent renewals envisioned in another time when I think the regulations that we've passed on the taxi industry over the years, having regulated the industry in 2 different cities, I think were necessary and were of great value. But now that you have a completely different industry with the TNCs, even though they're essentially the same, but just not regulated, I think we have to take another look at how we even the playing field. Part of it, I think, is to allow for this renewal, because it's not like there are other companies clamoring to join the taxi industry, which is barely hanging on. I think we have to, in fairness, give them some more time and give them time to adjust to what I view the unfair competition from sort of the cheating economy on the mobile piece of that cheating economy, which is Uber and Lyft, which largely gets by not following the regulations that everyone else has to follow. So I think we should give them this extra extension, and I think we should then take the time to figure out what we do need to do to level the playing field, and whether there are regulations that we strip out not because we don't think they're necessary, but because when you have a competing similar industry that doesn't operate under them, there's a certain element of unfairness to that. So I don't know if you've received the written motion.
I did. I actually had a question on what
and I don't know whether the written motion or whether a simple direction to add the couple of years is a more appropriate way to handle it.
I had a question on the intent of it. The commission did a 2-year extension. Is the intent of your amendment to make it effectively, by adding 2 years, a 4-year extension, or a 2-year extension with the option of 2 1-year renewals?
We wrote it that way. I'm open to either one, frankly. I think ultimately it winds up being 4 years. I don't envision us not doing that, but in whichever form seems to make the most sense.
Mr. Krikorian?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we were here 4.5 years ago for the last round of this extension, I think a lot of people questioned whether it made sense to do this extension, whether there was going to be benefit for the city in doing so. And in this room, we had a packed house, and Tony Cardenas and I sat at that table and argued in support of this 5-year franchise extension. And I think it has been a phenomenal success. The green fleet that we see on the streets now throughout Los Angeles have removed countless tons of carbon from our atmosphere, saved a phenomenal amount of energy. There's been a tremendous positive effect on our local environment from this last franchise agreement. And yet, as we've done that, as the operators have had to operate under that franchise, the entire business model has changed during that same 5 years. And the report aspect of this motion is so critically important because for decades this city has fought against the exact kind of bandit cabs system that is reflected in the Uber model. And we now have the state recognizing Uber as an employer that's engaged in wage theft. So, I think we have to allow this industry to be able to compete on a level playing field, to compete fairly against against competitors who've come in and frankly just ignored every regulatory framework that California has tried to operate under for many, many years. So the report is critical. I agree with Mr. Kretz's approach of adding the additional 2 years. In my view, I don't see any reason to do 2 one-year extensions. I'd prefer to do a single 2-year extension. I think one of the important things that we found 5 years ago was that the industry needed some certainty in order to invest in the new fleet. That new fleet is now aging out and will need to be replaced. So if we expect the industry to continue to invest the many tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle that they have to invest, I think we ought to at least give them the certainty of knowing that they're not going to have to come back here every year for more renewals. But at least the 4 years with the extensions will help give some certainty to an industry that is making a substantial investment in improving the environment of Los Angeles. So I second the motion.
Council members, just to clarify, the franchises have already been extended for 2 years, so what you're asking for, in addition to that, the city attorney doesn't have to prepare ordinances in regard to the extension. If you're going with the motion, what you need to do is request that the city attorney, prior to that 2-year expiration, presents ordinances for a 2-year renewal. We will have to submit ordinances for the renewal part of that. But we don't need them right now for the extensions.
Well, I actually think that we do. I mean, I don't know that we need them like this afternoon, but I think that there's a sense of urgency about this. I think Mr. Krikorian stated clearly that the industry needs some certainty. So I don't think we want to just put this on a slow roll and it can come back to us anytime over the next 2 years. I think what we would like to do is, let me see if I can sort of craft where I think the intent of the committee is. One is to affirm the action of the Commission extending through December 31, 2017. Number 2, to direct City Attorney to prepare an ordinance for council consideration that would extend from January 1, 2018 to December 31, 2019. And then 3 is the item in the motion, which is asking the DOT to report in 90 days with the preliminary scope of work for the study that we all find to be so crucial.
Just a point of clarification on the extension from 2018, 2019. You should use the word renew as opposed to extension. That's a different legal term, so that would be the only clarification I'd make to that.
Every now and then I'm willing to accept the advice of the city attorney, and this will be one of those occasions.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question, though, both of Tom and maybe Bill Rouse, if you could answer this. I asked Mr. Koretz about whether this should be the option for 2 one-year renewals or whether it should be the renewal. And the renewal is under the current terms, or the extension, however we're phrasing it. If the report and the study comes back from DOT sort of within the 2-year initial window, is there a way in which it's harmful to the industry to be locked in for 2 more years to that? Is it better for the industry to have the options versus the locked in? I'm just curious.
Do you want me to
Yes.
go first, or do you want to go first, Tom? Thank you, Councilman, for requesting our response on this. I think you're exactly right in your comment. We would not want a situation where we move expeditiously with a process where we look at reforms, where what we're envisioning is all the stakeholders have input into that process, and we come up with some set of rules that we can continue to operate in a way that's a lot more fair than the situation that we're dealing with today. Let's say we were able to accomplish that in 18 months. Would we want to be locked into these franchise rules for another 2 years before implementing that? No, the answer to that would be no. So I believe that the language should be 2 one-year options, and similar to the language that was contained in the current council or the current ordinance by the council, which was to give that authority to either the commission or the council.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, and this isn't my motion, so it's up to the maker and the seconder, but what I'm hearing is that would then be phrased as giving the council or the commission the option to do the 2 1-year between January 1 of 2018 and December 31 of 2019. So Tom and then Mr. Perez.
I just want to say that the 1-year extensions, 1 year at a time, are consistent with council policy in the past, where we wanted to review the performance of the companies and evaluate them, and then allow the department to make the recommendations that these companies be renewed. And you know what? They've all been doing a good job, and up to this point in time, there hasn't been any of the companies in danger of not being renewed based on their performances. But it's still a good idea to have that review available.
The way my motion wrote the part that's relevant is that the council also approve an additional 2-year renewal of current taxi cab franchise operators beyond the December 31st, 2017 extension date to a new date, ending date of December 31st, 2019. Request the city attorney to prepare the replacement ordinances using the same conditions as current franchise ordinances, with a replacement ordinance to be in effect from January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2019. Should a renewal of 2 years of the franchise be granted by either the council or the board, such renewal grant may be issued in single 1-year increments or for a maximum of 2 years. So it allows us to do either one at the time. So I don't know what your thoughts are on whether that gives us the maximum flexibility and whether it works.
Well, that was essentially as it was worded in 2010, and it worked then, and I think it would work now, sir.
I think you do want to give yourself the freedom, though, as Mr. Rouse had explained. You don't want to lock the taxi cab industry into these same franchise agreements where we cannot change the terms if we renew them, and that's where I was going with not rushing into that, but maybe putting on record that we are going to do it, or we're going to either issue new franchises under what comes in from the expert when they look at this, based on, we just really do need to expedite this process so it doesn't go 6 years like it did in the 1990s, and it goes quickly because the industry is changing so rapidly. We want to capture what we can to improve the taxi industry and give them a fair shot.
The wording of this, I thought, did that because it says such renewal grant may be issued in single 1-year increments or for a maximum of 2 years. Right. So whatever works the most appropriately at the time we renew, it allows us to either do 1-year increments or to do it as a 2-year if that's more favorable.
It depends on when you want us to bring back those those ordinances. The only reason I was saying there was no hurry is that if we determine, you've put on record that we're going to give them 2 years, but we will also want to be able to change them if we need to and not lock anybody in. So the closer we get to in 2017.
I think I'm hearing where part of the confusion is. I think the will of the committee is to be able to say with this action that there are 2 1-year or 1 2-year renewals or extensions available, and we want to be able to say that now.
Right.
What I think I'm hearing you say is if we want to say that now, we have to actually decide now if we are doing the extension of 1 year or 2 year?
Well, if you're asking the city attorney to prepare ordinances to renew for 2 years, it depends on when you're asking. If you're asking us to do it immediately, then that language is locked in. And I don't think that's what you want. I think what you're asking, I think what you want to do is maybe have language that says that the council will renew based on the report that it receives and the input from the industry, that currently, as it stands, we will renew for 2 years if that is what we end up wanting to. I'm not able to figure out how that language should be worded right now, but that they report back maybe in 6 months, because from this.
So I guess part of the confusion is that the language that we're looking at indicates that the council is approving a renewal starting 2018.
Right.
We shouldn't be approving a renewal. We should be approving an option to renew.
Right.
And that option could be exercised anytime between now and
That's correct.
December 31st of 2017. And when we exercise that option, we may exercise it as a 1-year or a 2-year extension, or presumably something else if we were to decide by then, based on the results of the report and the input from the industry and the department.
That is correct. That would be how to do that.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you again. May I offer two perhaps other alternatives? One would be to have an ordinance that modifies the existing ordinance that tacks on it 2 additional option years onto the existing ordinances. The other would be replacement ordinances for 2 years plus 2 option years that would commence January 1st, 2016. So in lieu of just cut off the 2 years that we were granted by the commission, replace those ordinances with 2-year ordinances, or just modify the other ordinance, the existing ordinances to add the 2 option years.
To do either of those, we would have to, I think, not act today and instead assert jurisdiction over the commission's action and
Yes.
take it up as a 245.
You'd have to do a 245.
Well, I'm trying to be helpful.
Thank you.
If I may say a word about the study, we already have a working draft that's under review by management of the scope of work for the study, and we anticipate that we could be able to report back on that very quickly.
Colleagues, were either or both of you comfortable with the recommended language from Mr. Nagel?
Well, I think it was the council members.
Was it pretty much what I said, so that we would add, well, now I don't know if I can do it a second time.
We can review the tape.
Maybe I can try. It was requesting the city attorney to prepare an ordinance that would provide an option to renew the franchise from January 1st, 2018 to December of 2019. There you would have the option
in 1
to
or
do
2 year
that.
increments.
Yes. Is that what?
Sounds good.
Does that work for the city attorney?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Laws and sausages. So that then is the direction of the committee. Affirm the board's decision. Item number 2, just as the CLA has stated, and item 3 is to begin work and report back on the scope of work for the study, which is imperative to getting a handle on this and making sure this industry survives. So without objection, that is the direction of the committee. Thank you to everybody who is here on this item. Thank you to staff. Thank you to my colleagues. We have no further items, right? We are adjourned. Thank you.